All came on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just burned my lunch, a sad little grilled cheese that I got distracted from while answering emails, and the smoke detector was still beeping when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I work from home as a medical billing specialist. My days are quiet. Spreadsheets, phone calls with insurance companies, the occasional argument with a claims adjuster who thinks I don't know what modifier 25 means. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I'm 31 years old. I have a cat named Biscuit and a plant I keep accidentally killing and then replacing without telling anyone. I do not have a child. Hello? Is this Audrey Callahan? Yes, this is she. Miss Callahan, this is Westfield Elementary School calling. We're reaching out because your daughter Penny has not been picked up from school. It's been almost 2 hours since dismissal. I stood there holding my spatula. The smoke detector beeped again. I'm sorry, my what? Your daughter. Penny Callahan. You're listed as her emergency contact. Primary guardian, actually. I laughed. It came out wrong, too short, too sharp. Ma'am, I don't have a daughter. I don't have any children. I think you have the wrong number. There was a pause, papers shuffling. Is this 614-555-0182? Yes, but Ms. Muth. Callahan, we have your name, your number, your address on file. Penny has been sitting in the front office for nearly 2 hours. She's 6 years old. We can't reach anyone else on the list. Something cold settled in my chest. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. I don't know why I said that. I should have said there was a mistake. I should have told them to call the police if they couldn't find the actual parents. But something in the woman's voice, tired, a little worried, not dramatic, made me believe her. And something else made me need to see it with my own eyes. The school was 12 minutes away. I hit every green light like the universe was pushing me forward. I parked crooked in the visitor lot and walked in through the front doors, and a woman behind the reception desk looked up at me with visible relief. Miss Callahan? Yes. Yes. She's right through here. She led me around the corner into a small office that smelled like copy paper and old coffee, and there was a little girl sitting in a plastic chair that was too big for her, swinging her feet because they didn't reach the floor. She had dark hair in 2 lopsided pigtails that looked like she'd done them herself, and she was wearing a purple shirt with a butterfly on it, and she had a backpack in her lap that she was hugging like it was a stuffed animal. She looked up when I walked in, and I stopped breathing. She had my eyes. Not similar to my eyes. Not the same color. My eyes, the exact shape, the exact shade of gray-green that I have spent 31 years looking at in mirrors and being told is unusual. The slight downward tilt at the outer corners. The dark ring around the iris. My eyes in the face of a 6-year-old I had never seen before in my life. Are you Audrey? She asked, not Ms. Callahan. Audrey. Yes, I said. I'm Audrey. What's your name? Penny, she said. Then, quieter, I know who you are. The receptionist excused herself to give us privacy, and I sat down in a chair across from this child and tried to hold myself together. How do you know who I am? I asked. Penny unzipped her backpack and dug around inside it, past a folder and a water bottle and what looked like 17 crumpled pieces of paper, and she pulled out a photograph. She held it out to me. It was a picture of me. Years old, maybe. I was wearing a blue dress I owned in my mid-20s that I donated years ago. I was smiling at whoever was taking the photo, and standing next to me with his arm around my shoulders was my ex-boyfriend. His name was Nathan. We dated for almost 3 years. He was charming in the specific way that takes a while to see through. He was also a medical researcher. He worked at a university lab. I thought I loved him. I thought a lot of things about Nathan that turned out to be wrong. We broke up 4 years ago. He had cheated. That was the part I knew about. The part I hadn't known about, apparently, was everything else. I drove home with Penny in the back seat because I didn't know what else to do. The school had called the police. I found that out later. But the officer they sent suggested I take the child somewhere safe while they tracked down information. My name was on every document. My name, my address, my signature. Except it wasn't my signature. I found that out later too. That first night, Penny slept in my guest room on a bed that usually held boxes of stuff I meant to donate. I made her a quesadilla because it was the only kid food I could think of, and she ate it without complaint and asked for a glass of water. And when I turned off the light, she said, "You look like me." I stood in the doorway for a moment. "Yeah," I said. "I noticed that too." "Daddy said you were a good person," she said. "He said if anything ever happened to him, you'd take care of me." I didn't sleep that night. I called my sister the next morning. She lives in Cincinnati, 45 minutes south, and she has 2 kids of her own, so I figured she would be calmer about this than I was. I was wrong. "What do you mean someone's kid is at your house?" "I mean exactly that. Audrey, you have to call—" I called the police. "They're looking into it, but her name is officially listed as Penny Callahan. My last name, my address, my everything. Legally, until this gets sorted out, she's apparently my responsibility." My sister was quiet for a second. "Does she look like you?" I didn't answer right away. "Audrey, does she look like you?" "Yes," I said. "She does." The police located Nathan 4 days later. He was in Portland, Oregon. He hadn't fled. Exactly, he'd taken a position at a research hospital there 8 months prior. He had not mentioned, apparently, that he had a child in Columbus who he was leaving in the care of a woman who didn't know the child existed. What came out over the following weeks was this. 3 years before Penny was born, Nathan and I had talked, the way couples do, about the future. I had mentioned once in passing that I had done a consultation at a fertility clinic, not because I was trying to have a child then, but because I had a family history of early menopause and a doctor had suggested I look into egg preservation. I went to the consultation. I got the information. I decided I wasn't ready and didn't go back. I told Nathan this. I thought I was being open with him. I thought we were having an honest conversation about life and the future. What Nathan heard apparently was an opportunity. He worked in a university medical lab. He had connections. The kind you don't talk about in polite company. He found the clinic where I'd had my consultation. He forged a consent form with my signature. He paid someone, this part is still being investigated, to complete the procedure without my knowledge, without my presence, claiming I had authorized it in advance. He used my genetic material to have Penny. He used a surrogate. He raised Penny himself for 6 years, telling her that her mother was away, but that she was a good person and someday she'd know her. He had an entire story built. He kept a photograph. And then when things got complicated in his life, a new job offer, a new relationship, a lawsuit from a former colleague that had nothing to do with any of this, he just left. He left Penny in school one morning and he drove to Portland, and he apparently told himself that I would figure it out, that I would take care of her. The detective who handled our case was a woman named Collins who had been doing this for 20 years and did not look surprised by anything. She explained it to me in a conference room with bad fluorescent lighting and a cup of coffee I couldn't drink. He committed identity theft, fraud, medical fraud specifically, and a handful of other things we're still working through, she said. He's been located and he is cooperating. I want to be honest with you, Ms. Callahan. The legal process here is going to be complicated. Penny's birth certificate lists you as the mother. Your name is everywhere. Is that my fault? My voice came out harder than I meant it to. No, she said. It is absolutely not your fault. But it does mean that you have standing, legally. You could petition for full custody, or you can let the state take over, and Penny will go into the foster system while we sort this out. I looked at the table for a long time. She's 6, I said. Yes, she did nothing wrong. No, she didn't. I thought about the way Penny had eaten that quesadilla without complaining. The way she said good morning to Biscuit every day now, like they'd known each other for years. The way she folded her pajamas before putting them in the hamper because Nathan had apparently taught her to do that, and that small domestic detail gutted me for reasons I couldn't fully explain. What does Penny want? I asked. Detective Collins looked at me. She asks about you. When the caseworker meets with her, she asks if she's going back to Audrey's. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking garage for about 15 minutes. Then I went upstairs and told Penny we needed to talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, very serious for a 6-year-old. Her pigtails slightly less lopsided today because I've been practicing. I want to be honest with you, I said, because I think you deserve that. She nodded. What your dad did wasn't right. He made choices that he should not have made, and a lot of grown-ups are working to figure out what happens now. But I want you to know that none of it, is because of anything you did. You're not a problem. You're not a mistake. Do you understand that? Are you going to send me away? She asked. No, I said, and I meant it before I'd even finished saying it. I'm not going to send you away. She climbed out of her chair and came around the table and hugged me. She was small enough that her arms only went around my waist, and she pressed her face against my ribs and held on, and I put my hand on the back of her head and just breathed. This was not a moment I had planned. This was not anything I had planned. This was not anything I had planned. Nathan was charged federally. Medical fraud, identity theft, falsification of documents, child abandonment. His lawyer tried to argue that his intentions had been good, that he had genuinely wanted a child and had genuinely believed I would have agreed if he'd asked. The judge was not moved. He pled guilty to 3 of the 5 charges and was sentenced to 4 years. His name was removed from everything connected to Penny. My family had opinions. That's the polite way to say it. My mother cried on the phone for 20 minutes and then asked if she could come visit. My sister drove up the weekend after I told her and brought her kids. And Penny spent 3 hours in the backyard with my niece and nephew and came inside with grass stains on both knees glowing. She fits, my sister said quietly, watching from the kitchen window. She wasn't wrong. The adoption was finalized 7 months after that Tuesday with the burned grilled cheese and the smoke detector. It was a gray November morning and the judge was a small man with reading glasses and a surprisingly warm handshake. And Penny wore a red dress she had picked out herself and white shoes that she insisted on. And my mother and sister sat in the gallery and cried in a way that was, for once, welcome. Do you want to say anything? The judge asked Penny, because he was the kind of judge who asked children things. Penny thought about it very seriously. Then she said, I just want to say that Audrey makes really good quesadillas, and I think this is a good idea. The judge laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. He stamped the papers. There are things that are still hard. There are nights Penny asks about her dad, and I don't lie to her. And I don't pretend that what he did was okay, but I also don't take away the parts of him she loved. He was her father for 6 years. He taught her to fold her pajamas and the names of all the planets and how to make scrambled eggs. She's allowed to love those things. She's allowed to have feelings about him that are complicated. I think she will be working through those feelings for a long time, and I will be there for all of it. I went back to the fertility clinic. I talked to a lawyer and then to the clinic's medical director and then to their ethics board, and changes were made. I can't talk about the specifics. But I can tell you that the person who falsified my consent form no longer works in medicine. Last April, Penny turned 7. We had a party with exactly the people she wanted. My sister's family, 2 girls from her class, Biscuit wearing a birthday hat that he immediately removed, and a woman from my building who Penny had decided was her honorary grandmother on the basis that she always had butterscotch candies in her pocket and gave very good advice. I made a cake from scratch. Chocolate with cream cheese frosting because Penny had been very specific about the frosting. I messed up the first layer and the whole thing leaned slightly to the left, and Penny looked at it and said, very earnestly, I think it has character. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. She sounded so much like me in that moment. Not because Nathan made her that way, but because she'd been living in my house, breathing my air, learning what I find funny, learning what I think is worth saying out loud. She's becoming herself, and some of that self looks like me, and it has nothing to do with genetics. It has nothing to do with what was done to either of us without our permission. It has to do with a Tuesday in September when a school called about a child I didn't know I had, and I drove there anyway. I'm still not sure why I drove there. I've thought about it 100 times. Maybe I was just someone who needed to see it with her own eyes. Maybe somewhere. Underneath all the burned lunches and insurance spreadsheets and a life that was quiet in ways I hadn't admitted were lonely, I had room for something I hadn't planned. Or Maybe Penny just needed someone to show up, and I was there. Some mornings I wake up before she does, and I listen to her sleeping. Kids are loud sleepers. That surprised me. And I think about how completely unrecognizable my life would be to the woman who answered that phone call. And I think that woman would be scared and overwhelmed and unsure. But I think she would also be relieved. I think she would see what I see every morning when a 7-year-old with lopsided pigtails appears in my kitchen and demands to know what's for breakfast. A life that is louder and messier and more exhausting and more full than anything I had before. Not what I planned. Better than what I planned. I think about Nathan sometimes, not with anger anymore, mostly with a kind of exhausted clarity. He was a smart man who made a monstrous choice, and he dressed it up in his own mind as something almost reasonable. He told himself he wanted a child. He told himself I would have said yes. He told himself it would work out. That's the thing about people who do harm without conscience. They're rarely cackling villains. They're people who got very good at rationalizing and never once stopped to ask whether what they wanted gave them the right to take it. It didn't. It never does. And the life he built on that foundation, the forged signature, the stolen cells, the 6 years of raising a child on a lie, it collapsed, the way things built on lies always do. Not because the universe punishes bad people in tidy, dramatic ways, but because reality has a way of surfacing. Because a little girl gets left at a school and a phone rings and someone answers it. I answered it. I didn't know what I was doing when I drove to Westfield Elementary that Tuesday. I just knew I needed to see it. And I think that instinct, that refusal to look away from something confusing and uncomfortable, was maybe the first decent thing in this whole story. It would have been easier to insist it was a mistake and hang up. Easier to let someone else handle it. I had spreadsheets to finish. I had a burned grilled cheese on my counter. I had a quiet life I had arranged very carefully around the edges of loneliness I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. But I went, and that's the part I keep coming back to. Not the legal battle, not Nathan's sentencing, not even the adoption, though that morning in the courthouse with Penny in her red dress is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. What I keep coming back to is the small, unglamorous decision to show up when showing up was inconvenient and strange and made no logical sense. Penny is teaching me things I didn't expect to learn at 31. She's teaching me that being present is a skill, and you get better at it with practice. That you can love someone you didn't plan for. That a 7-year-old folding her pajamas, because a flawed man taught her to, can break your heart and put it back together at the same time. She asks hard questions about her dad, about where she came from, about why people do things that hurt other people. And I don't pretend I have clean answers. What I try to give her instead is the truth as clearly as I can say it, and the reassurance that she is allowed to feel whatever she feels about it. I think that's what doing right by someone actually looks like. Not grand gestures, not a perfect story. Just telling the truth, staying in the room and not flinching when the questions are hard. I'm not the same person who burned that grilled cheese. I'm someone who wakes up early and checks that a 7-year-old is still breathing, which, I've been told, is a thing every parent does and never fully stops doing. I'm someone who has learned to do lopsided pigtails and advocate in IEP meetings and cry quietly in the car after hard days so she doesn't see. I'm someone who chose this every day, even on the days when choosing it was tiring. Nathan thought he was building a family. What he actually built was a trap. For Penny, for me, for himself. What I'm building is different. It's slower and less certain, and I mess up the cake layers and lean on my sister more than I probably should. But it's built on something real, and Penny, who has every reason to distrust adults, trusts me. That's not nothing. That's everything.